Welcome to this weird little section where the podcast seems to be nameless. I think, well, we've got a few good ones, so I think we should have one by next week, hopefully. Anyway, my name's George.
My name's Oscar. I thought the structure of this episode was really, really interesting. The way that George started it meant that it really felt like we kind of plunged very, very deep right at the start and then worked our way upwards. And I found that structure really cool. It's kind of the first time that we've done that, I think. So
yeah.
That was really, really fun. And it really got me kind of thinking in a totally different way. So I hope you can kind of get that from listening to it.
Yeah, it was really interesting how the structure kind of came through because it was not how I'd planned the episode to go, but it felt like it really kind of came round nicely. And we talked about pretty much the most fundamental things you can of like what is happening. We really got to it sounds a bit self-indulgent to say this, but like the root of life, at least that's what we were kind of trying to really get to. And I thought that this was going to be more just talking about the quote, but it felt like we really like followed the quote and we're just like, right, let's find what is the root of what's going on. And we kind of just shared our thoughts about that and some of the ways, it's that we can deal with what is going on. And Oscar kind of gave a really nice description of Buddhism and how it seeks to deal with the fact that there is suffering in the world and really the three core components of that. So I thought it was a really nice explanation of that actually. And it just really tied in nicely. So I think it's a good little chunk of episode and I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it.
The quote for this week is by Singhashri, and Singhashri is she's a spiritual teacher really, and a friend, someone that I've been on retreat with a number of times, and I really admire. She's just does really incredible work, leads these really amazing retreats that are just very, very well structured and very deep. And I just say that she's a very kind of deep practitioner, really spiritual practitioner. She's a Buddhist. And yeah, I got this quote from her website, The Radical Embrace, and it goes as follows. The word radical comes from the Latin radix, which means root. Any radical act must get down to the root of things, which often lies below the surface, is hidden from view, taken for granted, yet is ultimately essential for existence. I was trying to figure out why I was drawn to this particular quote and the word radical in particular. I think that, actually a thought of a walk that me and George went on probably about a year and a half ago, where we were discussing what is meaningful to us really on this walk. And one of the things that came up was this aspect of getting to the root of things, like really looking into the foundations of meaning, of why we do certain things, what is life about. And I think that that's why I feel drawn to this quote and this idea of getting to the root of things is there's something that I think attracts both me and you, George, like this aspect of really trying to dig down and find what is at the base of what is happening. And it's funny because I think that I've often been in positions where I've been in conversations with people who use bigger words than me and I don't quite understand what they're saying. And it ends up being this very theoretical and complex world of ideas. And in those situations, what I really find myself wanting to do is understand what's the foundation of what we're talking about here. It's all well and good going on to the kind of complexities, but what actually lies beneath this? And I think that this podcast in itself is really based on this tendency that we both have. I think with every quote, it's really not about getting into heady ideas on the surface and really trying to get a lot of breadth. It's really like we're trying to get to the root and what's in the middle of this quote. That's always the question. Okay, what is in the middle of this? And so I think that's what attracted me to this quote. And I think I'm just generally interested in talking about what being radical really is, because I think we have a preconception about it, but I'm interested in exploring that a bit further. Like what does it mean to be radical? So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Yeah, I hadn't fully thought of it through like that, but yeah, I do really enjoy that process. Like that's something that is one of the most inherent things in how I am, is that need or that desire to really understand things and to like really, yeah, really. I mean, I wonder how many times I'm going to say the word root in this in this bloody episode. Really get like to the root of whatever it is. And I remember even trying to like do this process and getting down to the most fundamental things, trying to really distill things as far as I can. And I guess is a bit tangential, but anyway. And I remember the thing that I could be most certain of was just that something is happening. Like that was like when I really got down to it, that was the only thing I could say with complete certainty. And I feel that really is the root of things, that there is experience, something is happening, but beyond that, everything is really just an abstraction built upon that. You're making assumptions about what is happening or what they mean. You're creating a narrative, weaving it into a story about your life or about your world, the universe. And these are all built on top of that. Everything could be an illusion. Everything. The only thing that can't be an illusion is the fact that there's something here. You don't know whether it's real, what really is the cause of it, what is the root of it, but you know that there's something. So yeah, I just wanted to share that as my insight of the root of things. Is, I don't know what really to do with that information, but
well, it's good we got that covered from the start.
Yeah. So before we get back to the episode, there's a new feature on Spotify now, and you can do it on Apple Podcasts as well, where you can leave a rating for the podcast. So if you've got a sec while you're listening to this, even if you could go on there, give us a review, that would be awesome. Yeah, we just appreciate that. So that's all. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
The conclusion that we've come to is that the only thing we really know for certain is that there is experience, that something's happening. That's it. So we can just like go, fundamentally that's what we've got. And then it's now a case of how do we build on top of that? Like what web then comes from that, that baseline of ultimately we really don't know. But if we were going to make if we were going to make the most fundamental assumptions and abstractions, what would they be?
Yeah.
Like what's the next sort of step? And I don't have an answer to that, but it's quite cool that right from the start that you've mentioned. Yeah. And we're kind of getting a bit indulgent into my own philosophies here, really. But the next thing on my list, which is the old classic, which is that there is no free will. That is an illusion. So for me, that is the thing that I'm second most sure of, beyond the fact that something's happening. Those are kind of the most fundamental things. But then I feel like the layer above that is where you start to get into morality of like, there is suffering, clearly, like, some experiences which are just objectively much more painful than others. And, that's kind of the next thing. And that's where I feel that's the first part where you can actually start trying to use this understanding to make decisions of like, okay, it seems like there's suffering. So it would be better if there was less suffering for conscious creatures. And there's very few people, I think, who would really say like, I think there should be more suffering in general for every conscious being. So I think that's kind of a core that you can get to with pretty much everyone. And from there, obviously, you get all these conflicts of, different political systems or different ideologies of how we should actually reduce that suffering. And, all sorts of other things. Then you start to get, about your ideas of just getting your needs met or whatever it is. But I think I see that as kind of the next level, is that like suffering exists, and the most ethical thing to do is to try and reduce that suffering. But yeah, then it's kind of a free for all of like, well, how do we do that?
and you've just got to kind of find your own ways to do that.
From your perspective, this is the map that we've got so far, is that right at the bottom, the core root that you know of life is that something's happening. You can totally be sure of that.
Mm-hmm.
The next level up is that there isn't free will, that we actually, since everything is conditioned in life, then there couldn't be an individual decision maker, because everything happens based on conditions, and is essentially every single action is a domino effect from the very start of time. We still haven't had a whole episode to discuss this, so I'm really apologies skating over it, but we always seem to avoid
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. It's, that's just how it is. Just
keep doing what you're doing. Yeah, it'll be fine.
And then this thing of working with suffering and working with getting your needs met. And I think this is really nice, because this is where the breadth starts to happen of when we're thinking about, because bringing it back to the word radical, on a societal level, what is deemed as radical often is at the root talking about justice, for example, or it's talking about equality. But at the time that it's happening, so just as an example, you've got the civil rights movement, and that at its root is based on the idea that there should be equality. It really shouldn't matter what skin tone you have. You should be treated equally. And that's the kind of core principle and the root of that. And then that is deemed as radical because that doesn't fit in with how society is currently built. So society is like based on all sorts of different conditions. It doesn't see that root is important. And a movement like the civil rights movement says, no, we're going to get down to the root of humanity here. And this is important.
Yeah. And everything from there up needs to be restructured, because we're changing this fundamental belief that we're building our society on. So now from there, it's going to have to ripple up, and anything's going to have to change with that new belief.
And that's really cool, because it's, and there's other examples of this that are maybe as much as the civil rights movement on one level is still totally alive, and the issues there are still totally alive, it might be more obvious with something like veganism. So right now, I'm sure that a few people listening to this podcast are vegan. Many won't be. The idea with veganism, and I'm not making a value judgment here as whether or not this is right, despite us both being vegan, but it's not really about that, what I'm talking about. From the perspective of the vegan movement, a fundamental thing, like a root, is that animals shouldn't have to suffer unnecessarily. It needn't be the way that it is. And the fact that people do eat meat and have dairy unnecessarily is not paying respect to the root value of the fact that beings should be able to live in peace if that is possible to do. But society, on a societal level, it's not in line with that particular root. So again, it's like veganism, sort of, even though it's very accepted now, is seen as radical because it's based on something that's at the root, but is currently misaligned with what the rest of society is doing. So it's just it's really cool. This kind of picture that I've got in my head and what you said about that, actually you deal with the root you look at the root and then you shape society around that particular root. That's how it, that's kind of how it has to go. So again, it's just one of those ones. Veganism, I think, is an interesting one to look at because it's so normal to eat meat that it can go by unquestioned as to whether or not it's right. It's just, that's how it is. And so when that's how it is and someone says, well, yeah, but it shouldn't be, then they're deemed as a radical.
One of the first things I thought of actually when I saw this quote was about treating the cause rather than the symptoms. So this, a common thing, if you have a cold, there's two different types of remedy. There's the remedies that just, say a painkiller, right? That's treating the symptoms. You've still got, it doesn't make anything better in your body. All it does is just means that you don't experience the negative effects as much, but it doesn't fix anything. And, sometimes you can't get to the root of things. Sometimes with a lot of illnesses or something like that, it's just all right, I might just have to have paracetamol. I can't completely change this. I guess it's good to be aware with it for things like health. I've tried to become more healthy. I mean, I've always had been fairly healthy, but I had some issues with my health with kind of not supplementing properly. Ironically, from from being on a vegan diet. um, but that was something where when I had those problems and those symptoms, I could start to think like, okay, maybe I just need to have a coffee. And you can keep on trying to do these little things to kind of medicate yourself in the moment. But really, I feel much better now that I'm kind of making sure that I get all the right nutrients that I need and eat healthily. And that just gives me like a good foundation of health, which makes everything so much easier. That's one of the massive factors with COVID, for example, is people being, overweight. Like that's, something that has I can't remember. I think it's either the first or the second like largest factor in whether someone's going to have like a very severe or fatal case of COVID. So that's something where, the root of it, the root of just health is going to make all of the other things in your life easier. So many things, you're going to have more energy. You're going to be much more resistant to illness. There's going to be so many other benefits that are, you're going to see that are going to kind of flower above. And it's going to look like your life is just easier and happier and healthier. But a lot of that can be because, you're really taking care of your body, and you're making sure to exercise and eat food that works well for you. And, that it's not like there's one diet. Like I feel really good on a vegan diet. Like that's what I grew up on, but I definitely did need to kind of adjust it and, make sure that I'm getting the right nutrients as well. But yeah, I think that's a root cause of a lot of your life, something that's kind of a core that influences so much of how your life is, just having that base of health.
Yeah. And I think that, say, thinking about that in terms of the more radical aspect of it, I guess, is thinking that, for example, I can imagine when the connection between physical health and something like mental health was being linked up, like as in, you feel low mood because you're not exercising or eating well enough. And initially an approach like that would have seemed quite radical, really. It would have seemed like, well, this is something mental. This is something, I feel bad in my mind. I have bad thoughts, or, I'm perceiving things quite badly. What the fuck has that got to do with if I'm not eating salad or whatever? That's not relevant. But an approach like that, which is more holistic, which I guess the idea of kind of the holistic comes from like something whole, something that's, sees the interconnection between things and actually says, oh no, if we go a bit further down here, and actually deal with the fundamental thing of the fact that one's body reacts much better and energy levels are massively improved and all sorts of things work so much better with healthy food, because it's what your body really wants and needs, and it just covers so many more bases. And then like that is a root cause of a lot of issues, and there's such a link between that and all the stuff within Buddhism, for example. So we've talked about health and the root and the kind of more radical aspect of that, of like just getting to the core and eating better and exercising as a way of improving every other aspect of your life, from sleep to personal relationships to all these sorts of things. So, well, Buddhism is very radical, and that's something that if you were to talk to someone on the street with very little context would seem a bit bizarre, that they might not actually agree that that's how it's perceived on a societal level, because it's like, oh, what, you're just sitting down and doing not much and being quite a chilled out person. Like, what? That's not radical. I see radical as being like taking the streets, being like a Marxist or some shit, like what, why is Buddhism radical? But the reason why Buddhism is radical, in my perspective, is that really what it's based on is not about being a calmer person or being a nicer person. That's not the root of it. That's not what's foundational within Buddhism. What's foundational in Buddhism is looking to the end of suffering. That's what Buddhism is really about. It goes all the way down and travels all the way down all of our habits and kind of gets right to the bottom. And what it finds is the root cause of suffering is greed, hatred, and delusion. And other ways of putting this is greed. Another way is desire. Hatred, another term for that would be aversion. And delusion, you can say ignorance, you can say confusion. So the three core foundational aspects of suffering from a Buddhist perspective is the fact that we are wrestling with what is all the time. So we're either saying that I need something else to fulfill me, so desire or greed. So in this very moment, for me, it's like I need to finish what I'm saying. I need to make sure I articulate this what I'm saying well enough so that I get approval, or so that I feel that this episode is going to be good. So it's even subtle things like that. Is like, it's something that's outside of what is, that is meaning that this current moment is incomplete and I'm discontent with what's going on. So that's suffering, where that discrepancy between what is and what I want to be. So that's desire. Hatred or aversion is, I don't want what is. I don't want what's here. You know, I don't want my back to hurt. I don't want whatever. I don't, you know, like, I haven't got my full computer set up today because stuff's in my studio. And I don't want that. I don't want my computer sitting on a paint bucket right now. I don't want that. You know, it doesn't look good, you know, but it's like, it's saying this moment is wrong. This is a wrong moment. And as soon as I get rid of something, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be complete. And the ignorance or the delusion is the fact that the greed and hatred, the pull-push mechanism that's causing suffering, just continues to roll on, and we just can't see it. Like, we can't see that that's what's causing our suffering. So we're ignorant of it. We're kind of turning away from that fact and looking elsewhere for the cessation of suffering. We're looking towards food. We're looking towards whatever. So greed, hatred, and delusion, supposedly that's the kind of core, that really is the core of human suffering. And that is radical, to say that there are basically three aspects to human suffering. You know, it's just like, you're going to have a lot of shit for saying that, in a way, because it's just like, are you kind of simplifying everything down to three things? And I don't actually agree with that. I don't, you know, I agree. I would say that injustice is the root of all suffering, or whatever it might be. There might be arguments about it. It's like, but it's radical, because it's saying, after like thousands of years of reflection, contemplation, and really trying to dedicating your life to looking at the root of things, it comes down to these three things. And then living from that as a Buddhist, you know, living from that truth as a Buddhist, you know, is a kind of radical way of life.
I think that's a really nice moment to move on to next week's quote. You ready?
Cool. Yeah.
Sweet. Banging. This was one that actually just randomly popped up on my Instagram. Usually I've got like a big list that I kind of go to, but it just popped up and it just seemed like a great one. And it's from Pythagoras, and it goes, "Nobody is free who cannot control themselves."
Nice. Yeah, I like it. Beautiful.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and enjoy the rest of your week. Peace.